Okay, so this is my stillborn story. My daughter is 4 years old, and I got pregnant with her around 6-7 weeks after giving birth to my son Angelo. He was stillborn. So it's been about 5 years. Before this, I was not able to sit down and express my story to anyone other than direct family members or people who were there during the event. For some reason, today felt like the day that I should go ahead and try and do that. I have this pendant which has the name, or sorry, the initials and the birthday of my kids. And I went and got this bracelet. It has Angelo on it and his birth date with his birthstone. At the time, while I was dealing with his loss, I went and got this pendant made. It has his name and his birth date on the back. I melted all the jewelry that I had, my grandmother's ring, my grandmother had passed, so that I could have something that I could wear every day to help me deal with the grief, and I've been wearing it for the last 5 years, and decided to put it away for something less obvious. Okay. So beginning with everything that's happened, things that happen to you really make an impact on who you are and the way that you deal with things. So when I went into labor with Angelo, I was at work, and so I called his father, and he took me to Jubilee Hospital. Now, at the time, I knew that I would have to have a C-section, and Jubilee, when it comes to the fees, it was the best thing for me to do, so I had already registered to have him there so I would not be paying the costs for private doctors and anesthesiologists and all those things, because financially at the time I couldn't do that. So he took me in and I went. There was one doctor on call. There were around 10 to 15 other mothers just in the room where the nurse was, not counting the mothers who were on the ward. So that's one doctor for the whole ward. I didn't think anything of it because I didn't think anything was wrong. So sat there, we joked while I waited for the nurse to check me. I was in no rush. I was because I was thinking, you know, everything's good. Finally, when the nurse got to me, she says to me, something is off, because she's not hearing a heartbeat. But she told me not to worry. She's like, oh, don't worry about it. You're just gonna go ahead and do what you have to do. And so I kind of ignored it because I had been to my doctor, my private doctor, I think it was around 2 days before, and had heard the heartbeat and everything was good. So I thought, you know, maybe it's just one of those things, because I felt movement and was just pretty sure that everything was good. So I didn't really pay any mind. They sent me on the ward where they had beds with mothers on it that were still in labor but they weren't ready to deliver, and just left me there and said, if you feel like pushing, call me. And I was like, okay. So I'm there going through labor, and I'm like, I feel like pushing. So I called them, and they said, okay, you have to take up your things and walk over to the labor room and climb up on this table. And there are other mothers on other tables with nurses giving birth. And so eventually I push him out. So his arms across his chest, and she says, "Oh, he's not alive. Uh, oh, no wonder. Something." And she takes this brown paper, and she puts him in this brown paper, and she shows him to me, and she's like, "See?" And she wraps him in brown paper, and she puts him on the tray underneath the bed that I'm lying on, and she says, "Oh, get up, get dressed, and go and sit over there." And I get up and I go and sit, and where I'm sitting, there's still other mothers in there giving birth, and there's some mothers sitting on the bench next to me holding their babies, and I'm just in shock. I'm in shock. I'm just sitting there looking at these mothers with their babies, and the nurse turns to me and she goes, "Oh, don't worry, you're young, you can have another one." And I'm like, what? But it's still not sinking in. They send me to a room where there are mothers with babies, and they're breastfeeding babies, and everybody's like, "Where's your baby?" And I'm like, "My baby died." And I end up helping this mother that's trying to breastfeed her baby, but it's her first child and she doesn't know what to do. And I'm telling her what to do. I'm trying to show her what to do. And they're like, "You're dealing with it so well." And I'm just like, I know. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Till eventually I get to speak to my mother and the baby's father and tell them what happened, uh, cry, and then they say they're putting me on the ward. And I say to them, "Father needs to see the child." And the nurse is like, "Well, I didn't say it to her before." And I'm like, just everybody's just so nonchalant about the whole thing. And they bring the brown paper and they open the brown paper and show him. And I didn't have anything. I didn't get anything, um, hair, footprint, nothing. And and so I took a picture, and it wasn't something that I'd want to show people. I took a picture so that I could have a picture of him. And they wrapped him back in the brown paper and put him back in a box, a cardboard box. And they send me with the other mothers to go on the ward. And everybody's walking, but they have babies in their hands, and I'm the only one walking without a baby. And they check you before they put you on the ward, but they put you up on this table and check you in front of everybody. And so she says, "You have to take this out. You can't be on the ward with it." I said to her what I said to them before. I can't take it out because it's been in so long. Actually, since I put it in, I've never actually tried to take it out, and it's really difficult. I don't know if it's cross-hatched or whatever, but yeah, I couldn't take it out. And she started getting upset. She started getting agitated. Telling me I can't be on the ward. Till one of the nurses says to her, her child, that like, leave her alone. Her child died. And then she was like, "Oh, okay, like whatever." And so they gave me, I think it was a band-aid or something to put over it, because when you go into surgery you can't have the jewelry in, and they had given me a band-aid at that point to cover it. And then they put me on the ward. So they put me on the ward, the beds, everybody has their babies, and I'm sitting there. I don't know how long I'm gonna be here. I'm thinking, oh, they're just gonna discharge me, check me, see that I'm maybe nothing is wrong, I'm not bleeding or anything, and be like, "Okay, you can go." I was there on the ward, and everybody's feeding their kid, babies are crying. It's a big ward. There's like at least 6 to 10 on my side, and there's like 3 rows, I think it was at the time. Nurses' quarters, everybody's kind of right there, and everybody keeps asking, "Where's your baby?"
Bye.
Bray,
Now they say don't forget here. I'm gonna show you. I think I get trouble at times to tell you because I'm being rude. Because I am a star.
because you're a star. I'll be
And
back.
that's what I have. I
Babe,
have my tablet with my mom buy for me.
okay.
And start.
All right. Okay, so I'm on the ward, and the doctor, a doctor comes around, and they're supposed to check you, and he's like, "Oh, baby died. Okay, da da da. Did the SMO speak to you?" Nobody has spoken to me, other than the nurse who told me that the baby is stillborn, that the baby's dead. Um, he's like, "Okay," and then he leaves. And they keep coming back and being like, "Oh, we check your pressure," and nobody's saying anything to me. They're just checking my pressure. I'm on the ward. I'm helping mothers on the ward. I'm talking to the mother next to me because it's her first baby. The baby's crying. I'm explaining things to her. I'm telling her not to be frustrated. I'm giving advice. The nurses are watching me because they think I'm gonna run off with somebody's kid, and I don't know what's happening. So the next day, it's the same thing. I'm still on the ward, helping the mothers, talking to the mothers, talking to the nurses, um, bathing. I'm just there. And everybody's like, "Oh, she's the one whose baby died, and she's doing so well." And the doctor comes back, and I'm like, "I want to go home." And he's like, "That nobody has spoken to you? Nobody has still spoken to me." I saw the SMO who's in charge of all the doctors come on the ward and walk around and laugh with the nurses and sit at the station, and he never came and spoke to me. He never came and said anything to me. And I have nothing. I don't have a bracelet from the baby. I don't have footprints. I don't have a lock of hair. I didn't get anything. And then the doctor's like, they still haven't spoken to you. And I'm like, no. And I call my doctor and I'm telling my doctor what's happening, and he's like, this, that's not what they're supposed to do. That's not the way things are supposed to go. And I'm getting these stories from the mothers on the ward that this is a regular thing. This is what happens all the time. And eventually they're like, they're gonna let me go. And I'm leaving with the mothers, some of the mothers that I've gotten to know, and they let me keep their babies because they have to go to the bathroom, and they can't carry the baby with them. So I'm watching people's babies, and the nurses are watching me because they're afraid I'm going to do something. One of the mothers gave me her child while we were leaving. We're sitting like in a line to leave, and she let me hold a baby, and the nurse says, take back your baby, take back your baby. And the mother's like, what? Like, she's not going anywhere, she's not doing anything. Like, I've been there for the last 2-3 days helping them, and I'm leaving without my child, and everybody else is leaving with a baby, and they're wishing me well, and everybody's saying, you're really strong, and good luck. And I leave the war without a child. And there was a lot of issues, and there was a big thing about deaths and things at the hospital having to do with the newborns after that happened, and I had to go back to deal with the autopsy and the morgue, which was a whole nother thing. They piled all the babies together like you would if you were buying chicken. All the babies were piled on a table from a freezer. They were stuck together, and they couldn't find him because of the tag. And they're holding up babies like you would chicken. and he calls me in, and he's holding him by his foot. He's holding him up, and you know, like you hold up a chicken, it's just kind of dragged, just hanging there, and he's hanging by his foot, and I'm like, yes, that's my baby. And he's like, oh, okay. And then I left for them to do the autopsy. And I saw a mother there that I met when I registered, because we were talking when I was registering, when everything was good. And she was there for the same reason. She couldn't afford to pay for the C-section. She had a private doctor. She ended up coming to the public hospital to have the C-section because she couldn't pay for it, and her child died. She had other issues, other complications, but they had spoken to her. The SMO had spoken to her, and legal reasons, whatever. I can't say what was discussed, but the point is they had spoken to her and they said things to her, and they have never said anything to me regarding my child. No sympathy, not to say, oh, we're sorry that this happened. Nothing. Legal action was taken with other cases. I took none. I didn't question anything because I didn't want to be in it. I didn't want to deal with it. They asked me if I wanted the body. I wanted it, but I couldn't. I didn't have the money to bury him. So I let them. They buried all those babies. I think they buried them all together, which is what they told me. And I just left it at that. In hindsight, I wish I had taken the body, but that's just what happened, and that's just how it was. And so for a very long time, I couldn't do a lot of things. I couldn't deal with things having to do with babies or commercials with babies or just anything. And around 6-7 weeks after having Angelo, I found out I was pregnant with Brie. So she's what you call a rainbow baby. I think it's the child that you have after you've had a stillborn. So I was pregnant again. I had lost the weight, I had lost the belly, I hadn't lost anything, but it really helped to allow me to deal with what had happened, because I didn't replace him with her, but it filled a void. Like I felt like I could not function, and I would not be able to function again properly because of it. But I had to pull myself in. I had to find a way, because now I had to deal with another pregnancy, which was a whole nother set of emotions that I think no one can understand unless they've gone through it. Because every day of every minute of that next pregnancy, you think about the loss and you pray that it doesn't happen again. So that is the story of the stillborn, of Angelo's stillborn. I think of him every day. As you can see, I think of him every day. And I think of where he would be and what kind of a child he would be. And people tend to treat a stillborn as if you didn't have a child. So when people ask you, oh, you have kids? How many kids do you have? I've said 3, and other times I've said 4. And sometimes I even mentioned that he was stillborn, which make people uncomfortable, but I feel like I'm keeping the memory of him. Like saying that I only had 3 kids when I've had 4, I find it very odd. to me to do, because people don't understand and they don't know how to deal with things like that. So that's the story, and I didn't cry. So thanks for listening, and that's it.